recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing today. Mr. Tolman, in your testimony earlier, you mentioned a few reasons why overcriminalization is a problem. You said that the average American commits 3 felonies a day without even knowing it. What are some of those examples?
Well, the crimes on the books right now, there are many that are almost laughable. A federal crime to write a check for under $1, for example. I personally had a case in which a father and son were cold and didn't think they would make it out of the wilderness, and they cut up a park bench and burned it to stay warm, and they were charged and put in jail. So it's examples like that we could go through. Those would be the low-hanging, easy fruit for Congress to get rid of many of those laws.
My understanding is one of them is to sell malt liquor labeled as pre-war strength.
Yes.
Like, what is that about?
Yeah, you know, the liquor business is very, very serious. You can't label it. When they were regulating it very, very tightly, then you know there were issues with how they would be labeled in order to not falsely advertise the contents, and you developed the bottled in bond laws, which required certain levels of alcohol. Those are still on the books.
So the good stuff was the pre-war stuff.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Just to be clear. You also spoke that the current DOJ is choosing to throw away the rule of law when they attack political enemies. Can you talk about that a little bit and give me some examples of how that's happening?
It is a recent, I think, more recent development. There's always been, at times, pressures. When I was U.S. Attorney, I received a phone call from a member of Congress to investigate his political opponent. And I indicated that I would not, and that if he had a claim that he should submit it to the FBI. But I think there are good, well-meaning individuals that try to make those good decisions. But there's no question you cannot simultaneously proliferate the laws and expand the power of the prosecutor and at the same time expand immunity protection. You can't take away accountability and give them more power and not expect abuse to come as a result.
Mr. Tolman, I think it's interesting. Prosecutor abuse happens. It's happened for years. I mean, you look at in the case of politics, you look at like Senator Ted Stevens as an example several years ago. But to me, it seems to be much more in your face than it has ever been before. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
And I think the prime example would probably be the prosecution of President Trump under federal law and, quite frankly, under state law, too.
Well, you have a prosecution going on right now that individuals on both sides of the aisle have commented on the lack of evidence, the inapplicability of the law, the attempt to manipulate the facts in order to go after. Whether you like him or don't like President Trump, it should be concerning that a prosecutor would be able to manipulate their way into the courtroom against a political opponent.
Correct. And I'm going to switch gears on you again. You mentioned several examples, writing a check, the pre-war stuff, pre-war liquor. How can we, or even federal agencies, start to rein in this growth, quite frankly, in the administrative state? How can we do that?
I think there are plenty of professors, advocates, groups, even like Right on Crime, the organization I'm with, or many of the other organizations here, that would be willing to lend a hand to identify the criminal statutes and the criminal regulations that are outdated and could very easily be taken off the books. And that process should begin, and it should maintain. So you should continually be doing that as we move forward. Otherwise, we're just collecting and compiling and bloating our criminal code.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin, I want to turn to you. The expansion of our federal criminal laws and encroaching on areas traditionally governed by the states, creating constitutional tensions, redundancies in statutes. Prior to Congress, I served in the General Assembly of South Carolina, and I want to make sure that federal laws don't really overcomplicate efforts that are happening on the state and local level. Can you talk a little bit about how federal regulations are affecting state economies and local businesses?
Yes, thank you. It's a subtle effect in the work that I've done. Generally speaking, there's not a single regulation that will put a business out of business, but it's the death by 10,000 cuts sort of effect, or in this case, over 1 million cuts. So I've found that as federal regulation accumulates over time, it slows down investments in new ideas, and then it slows down innovation, and that ultimately makes businesses suffer because they can't put out new products, can't employ more people. There's all sorts of consequences all the way down the line.
So death by 1,000 cuts, the straw that broke the camel's back, these are the things that local businesses are facing every single day from the growth of the federal regulatory overreach.
Absolutely.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman's yields back.